When people talk about Hollywood's biggest box office hits, modern blockbusters like Avatar or Avengers, Endgame often top the list. But if we factor in inflation, the true box office king remains Gone with the Wind, starring Clark Gable and Vivien Leigh. Adjusted for today's dollars, the film has grossed an astonishing $3.4 billion and is still considered one of the greatest cinematic masterpieces in Hollywood history. What you might not expect, however, is that Gone with the Wind is also at the center of one of the most compelling modern stories of reincarnation. Tale that begins in a quiet American town and stretches across time, life, and death. The past life of an Oscar winner. In a small Midwestern town with a population of just 2,000, young Eric lived with his parents, James and Jennifer. From the moment he was born, Eric was different. He spoke early, forming small sentences. Just after his first birthday, and had an energy and curiosity that seemed beyond his years. But soon he began saying things no one could explain. Eric often talked about a time before he was Eric. He told his bewildered parents about living in a castle in the sky, looking down on Earth and carefully choosing his future parents. James and Jennifer initially dismissed it as the child's imagination. But then, one day, Eric said something that made Jennifer freeze. He told her he had been scared to come to Earth the first time and returned to the sky after an unsuccessful attempt. This time, he had decided to come down again. Jennifer was stunned. Before Eric was born, she had experienced a heartbreaking miscarriage, something she had never told anyone. Yet Eric somehow knew. He even claimed to be the same soul that had once turned back and now returned to be her child. Jennifer was overwhelmed, feeling both peace and amazement. The child meant to be yours, she thought, will always find a way back. Eric also told her how he came to Earth by climbing down a ladder from the sky. When asked how he knew it was the right time, he simply said, "Because it was my birthday." A different birthday? A different name. But Eric had always insisted his birthday wasn't on June 21, 2012. The date on his birth certificate. He insisted it was June 26th. No matter how many times Jennifer pointed to the calendar and corrected him, he grew upset and refused to accept it. Interestingly, Dr. Jim Tucker, a child psychologist at the University of Virginia and a renowned researcher of reincarnation cases, once noted that children with alleged past life memories typically prefer earlier birthdays, so Eric's insistence on a later date was unusual and significant. Then there was Eric's middle name, Cole. Every time he said it, he pronounced it Coe. Jennifer assumed he simply couldn't pronounce the L sound and corrected him gently. But Eric would shake his head and say firmly, "No, it's Coe. That was my mother's name." Jennifer tried to explain that her name was Jennifer, and she was his mother. But Eric looked at her and asked, "Your name is Jennifer?" She nodded. And he replied, "No, you're my daughter." Jennifer was my daughter. Now completely bewildered, Jennifer couldn't make sense of what he was saying. That is, until the truth began to unfold. Memories of tractors and trauma. Like many little boys, Eric loved cars and airplanes, but he had a strange fixation with tractors. He was fascinated yet terrified of them. He also couldn't stand having anything near his upper body. Being wedged between people or furniture made him panic. Worse yet, Eric suffered from intense nightmares almost every night. He would wake up screaming that his arm was crushed, that a vehicle was on top of him, or that he was dying. Again and again, he relived a tragedy in his sleep, and no one could explain it. Desperate for answers, Jennifer and James listened more carefully. They noticed that Eric frequently talked about Hollywood, not Disney movies, not theme parks, but working in Hollywood. He said he had a job to do there. He had a home there. At first, his parents brushed it off. But as Eric grew older, his frustration intensified. He refused to go to school, eat, bathe, or sleep until they promised they'd take him to Hollywood. One day, during a conversation, James asked, "You always say you have work in Hollywood. What kind of work do you do?" Are you an actor? Eric scowled. No, I don't like actors. A director then? Still no. Did you write something? Are you a writer? Finally, Eric nodded. Yes. I wrote movies. And other things. Curious, James and Jennifer listed famous films. Casablanca, Ben-Hur. Then came Gone with the Wind. Eric lit up instantly. That's my movie. I wrote that one. Jennifer, always open-minded about the idea of reincarnation, was stunned. Could her son be recalling the life of the person who wrote one of Hollywood's most iconic films? Discovering Sidney Coe Howard? Jennifer dove into research. She discovered that Gone with the Wind had been adapted by a screenwriter named Sidney Coe Howard. He was a Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright and posthumous Academy Award winner in 1944, his screenplay adaptation of the novel. Her heart skipped a beat. Howard's middle name was Coe. His mother's maiden name was Helen Coe. More shockingly, Howard had a daughter named Jennifer Howard. And Howard himself. He was born on June 26, 1891, the exact date Eric insisted was his real birthday. Suddenly, everything made sense. The names, the date, even the strange fears. The fatal accident. Eric's recurring nightmares also had a disturbing real-life parallel. Sidney Howard owned a farm in Massachusetts where he loved to retreat from city life. In 1939, just before Gone with the Wind was released, Howard was preparing to take his tractor out to the fields. A farmhand had mistakenly left it in gear. When Howard started the ignition, the massive Cleveland Cletrac tractor lunged forward and crushed him against the garage wall, killing him instantly. Crushed by a tractor? Upper body pinned? Death by mechanical force. Exactly as Eric had described in his nightmares. A visit to the past. Dr. Jim Tucker took interest in Eric's case and confirmed the details. He even discovered that Sidney Howard's daughter, the real Jennifer Howard, was still alive, still living on the Massachusetts farm, where her father had died. An emotional reunion was proposed. At first, Jennifer Howard was hesitant, but she eventually agreed to meet Eric. Scheduling delays meant the visit was postponed twice. By the time they finally visited the farm, Eric was older, and his memories had begun to fade. Even so, Eric showed a deep sense of calm and familiarity. He wandered the farm freely, as though he belonged there. When taken to the cemetery, Eric grew quiet. "I know this place," he said with some irritation. Then, without guidance, he walked straight to Sidney Howard's gravestone. Still, his nightmares continued until one final journey helped bring closure. Healing in Hollywood. Jennifer and James took Eric to Hollywood. There, they arranged a special tour at the Hollywood Museum with a Gone with the Wind expert. Eric explored the exhibits, absorbing the stories of his former life. After the trip, the nightmares began to fade. Eric, it seemed, was finally ready to let go of the past and fully embrace life as Erica knew, soul on a new journey. According to Dr. Tucker, many children who recall past lives begin to forget those memories around the age of 5 or 6. Eric's case was extraordinary, but not unique.
Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Share it, because some stories are meant to be discovered together. And stay curious. I'll see you in the next chapter.